All right, thank you, Daniel. Chapter 46, there are really two sections that we want to talk about. First of all, there's a worship section right up front. And then we have the genealogical section, or the numbers section, in the second part of it. So it seems like with Joseph revealing himself to his brothers and forgiving them, and they're all kind of coming together, and with the sending to bring the whole family back, there's kind of a revival that takes place within the family. This is one of the high points that they have the opportunity to experience. I mean, if we read through the text, we see that it was just one, hardship after another, a lot of times brought on by their own, sinfulness and so on. But here, there's a high point. All of a sudden, it's like equivalent to you've come into a lot of money, and now the whole family is going to be taken care of as a result of it. And so, you receive this inheritance, and, everybody is, there's no more trouble or, having to worry about the material things of life anymore after this. And so, making the trip to Egypt even that is taken care of. It's like when you get a new job in another place for a large company, they'll send the movers to your house and pack everything up and deliver you to the new place. That's part of, being hired on at this new job. So anyway, everything's taken care of. Joseph sends this caravan to take everybody and all of their belongings back to Egypt, and he's going to take care of them from that time on. So all that to say is this is a high point, a good thing, not to mention that Jacob, thinking his favorite son was dead, is all of a sudden alive. And not only is he alive, but he's ruling in Egypt. That reunion is great. The brothers, they are forgiven. Joseph, finally, when he reveals himself to them, is forgiving them. And so that load, that guilt is removed from them. And so this is kind of a high point for them. A revival takes place, if you will. And it says that as they journey, they go to Beersheba, which is kind of the southern part of the Canaanites there. So it's probably the last, it's like within, the area of the last point before they leave the promised land to go into Egypt. And it's there that Jacob offers a sacrifice to the Lord. So we see that in verse 1. He came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And then we see that God responds to Jacob. Now, besides all of this other stuff that I've mentioned, leaving the promised land should not be underestimated. If this is the land of promise, it was promised to Abraham, it was promised to Isaac, it was promised to Jacob, and now here he is. Even if the circumstances, for all appearances, it's a good thing to leave, he shows some spiritual, maturity here, or at least some sensitivity to God, that before he leaves, he offers this sacrifice almost as if to check out or to make sure, is this really okay with you that I'm leaving this land that you have promised to give to me? So God reveals himself to him. I am God and I'm with you. Don't be afraid. I'm still going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to bring you back here. So this is a really important revelation of God to Jacob, the head of the family of the promise. And so this is kind of a confirmation. He's supposed to go down to Egypt, and we see parallels of this even in the life of Christ. He's supposed to go to the land of Egypt, and God is going to bring him back to the land, and it's going to continue in the blessing and the prosperity and this covenant relationship that he's made with them. So that's the first part there, the first 4 verses, and it's an important 4 verses there. And then in the next part, we have this little, well, not so little, but a genealogical list or table of the names of the family of Jacob that are given here. We've been introduced to most of these people, well, many of them, at least the 12 patriarchs, although many of their children are foreign to us. They haven't been mentioned. They'll never be mentioned again except, as part of this genealogical table here. Now, there's a little puzzle. If any of you like math puzzles, what do they call those things? the puzzle books, the little math. No, just it's like a math puzzle book, quiz book, or it's not quiz book, but anyway. If you like that kind of thing, math puzzles, I've got one for you right here in this chapter, in verse 26 and 27. Here's your math puzzle, okay? All the persons who went with Jacob to Egypt who came from his body, besides Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2 persons. All the persons of the house of Jacob who went to Egypt were 70. All right, so in verse 26 you have 66. In verse 27 you have 70. And in Acts chapter 7, this is where Stephen is kind of recounting the history of Israel. Acts chapter 7, verse 14. Then Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. Okay, so that's the puzzle, the math puzzle. Try to bring those numbers together, okay? I don't know if anybody's going to take me up on that, but if you like math puzzles, there's one for you. So this is the number. It's not that many. They all go down over into Egypt. And if you remember the promise to Abraham, the promise is this, that he's going to multiply them. And going back to the Acts passage where he says Joseph sent, he's just recounting the story. Joseph sent and called for his father and Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. And then 3 verses later, and really here's the heart of what Stephen is saying. But when the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, that statement is important, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. And now you remember, he promised Abraham he was going to multiply them. And when he took them to Egypt, that was the place that God decided, for whatever reason, that God decided would be the place in which they multiply. And, we remember the story, and we know that's what happens, right? When we get to the book of Exodus, we make a shift. It's 400 and some odd years later. The people are like 1 million. They cover the sand of the sand on the seashore and the stars in the sky. They have multiplied in Egypt during this period, and so that part of the fulfillment, the part of the promise has been fulfilled. They become a nation, and that is, that's where we pick up with the Exodus and the coming out of Egypt and the going back to the promised land. So what we see in this is that God will bring about his purposes, and it doesn't matter how meager things look. So here's this little group of people, 60 or 70, which isn't, some of you have family reunions that are larger than that, right? And so that's not a whole lot of people, and yet they multiply in Egypt to a nation. And we see that it doesn't matter to God, right? Whether you have a lot or a little, it doesn't matter. If he promised to multiply you, he's going to take what little there is and he's going to multiply it. And of course we think of Jesus. What did Jesus do? This very thing. That's right, the fish and the bread, right? He took a few and he multiplied it for the multitudes. He just expanded it. It didn't matter that there were 5 loaves and 2 fishes or whatever there were. That didn't matter to him. There was more left over than he began, because he is able to take the little and make it a lot. And so we see that with this people here to whom God made a promise. He's going to take a few of them, 66 or 70 or 75, and that's just the males, by the way, just to give you a little clue or a hint. But and by the way, I don't have the solution to this math problem, so if anybody has some insight, I'm going to gobble it up, okay? Because I sat there and I've been trying to figure this out myself. So I've got the Genesis passage close, but throw in the Acts passage and I'm just all out of whack there. So anyway, so God can take the little and he can make it a lot, and so we can trust in him. He fulfills his promises, and he always does it in a big way that brings the glory and the praise to him. All right, any questions or comments? Any thoughts?
I always wondered when they went into Egypt, if Jacob ever thought back to the covenant that God made when he said that I'll make you a great nation and your seed will serve a strange nation for 400 years.
Yeah. About going to Egypt? Oh yeah, and that fits right into the first part of what we said here. He's leaving with the Egyptian caravan, and just as he gets to the end, to Beersheba, he stops and he offers the sacrifice. And I think if God didn't reveal himself to them and reaffirm that this is okay, that who knows, if it would have turned out differently. But it was important for Jacob to do that. And it is important, at least for our sake, to see that God did reveal to him that it was okay to do that. Because if you remember back to when we looked at Abraham, remember he went to Egypt. And we questioned, should he have done that? And then Isaac does the same. Well, with Isaac, it was with like the Philistines, the beginnings of the Philistines there. And we questioned, should they have done that? Should Abraham have gone to Egypt? Should Isaac have, stayed in that proximity there? We raised that question. And here at least, in this small revival that they're experiencing, it's a breath of fresh air to see that Jacob, before he does it, he offers a sacrifice. And he kind of gets the green flag, to go ahead with it. So, yeah, that was a good question. Good comment. All right, anybody else? All right. Let's take some prayer requests.